Hi guys, sorry to interrupt your viewing, but please subscribe to the channel and like this video. Thank you.
I never thought my own brother would betray me like this. We grew up close, sharing everything from our toys to our dreams for the future. So when I told him about my business idea, I didn't think twice. I trusted him. What I didn't know was that he'd take my idea, run with it, and leave me behind. Now, he's a millionaire, and he's telling everyone I'm just jealous of his success. It all started a year ago when inspiration struck for an app that I knew could revolutionize its market. I spent months brainstorming, sketching out designs, and researching competitors to make sure the idea was airtight. I was meticulous, pouring all my free time into refining the concept and mapping out a plan for execution. One night, during a casual catch-up with my brother over beers, I made what turned out to be the biggest mistake of my life. I shared the idea with him. He seemed genuinely interested, asking thoughtful questions and even offering suggestions I hadn't considered. "This is brilliant," he said, his eyes lighting up. "You're really onto something here." Hearing him praise my idea felt amazing. My brother had always been the confident one, the one who seemed to know everyone and everything about the business world. I figured his encouragement meant I was on the right track. When he suggested a few tweaks and improvements, I eagerly wrote them down, grateful for his insight. Over the following weeks, I shared even more details with him. My plans for monetization, potential investors I had identified, and even the prototype sketches I was working on. Each time, he listened intently, offering advice and reassurance. Looking back, I realized he was soaking up every bit of information, but at the time, I thought he was just being supportive. Then, a few months later, everything changed. I was scrolling through a tech blog when I saw an article about a new app that was already gaining traction. The headline caught my attention immediately. It described a concept nearly identical to mine. At first, I felt a strange mix of pride and panic, thinking someone else had independently come up with the same idea. But as I kept reading, my stomach sank. The app wasn't just similar to mine. It was mine, down to the smallest details. The interface, the features, the branding. It was everything I had worked so hard to develop. And at the bottom of the article, in bold letters, was the name of the app's CEO, my brother. I stared at the screen, my heart racing. This had to be some kind of mistake. Maybe it was a coincidence. Maybe he had been inspired by our conversations and created something similar. But the more I read, the clearer it became. He had stolen my idea. At first, I felt disbelief. My brother, the person I had trusted more than anyone, had taken my hard work and made it his own. But disbelief quickly turned into anger as the realization set in. He hadn't just stolen an idea. He had stolen months of my life, my dreams, and my chance to succeed. I knew I couldn't stay silent. This wasn't just about the money or the recognition. It was about standing up for myself and reclaiming what was mine. The moment I saw the article, I tried to convince myself it wasn't what it seemed. Maybe it was just a fluke. Someone else had coincidentally come up with the same concept. But deep down, I already knew the truth. The details were too specific. The execution, too, aligned with the plans I had shared with my brother. I spent the rest of the day researching, combing through every article, interview, and press release about the app. With every piece of information, my worst fears were confirmed. Not only had my brother taken my idea, but he had launched it with precision, securing investors and rolling out the app in record time. I tried to give him the benefit of the doubt. Maybe he had meant to include me but hadn't figured out how. Maybe there was a misunderstanding. But when I saw his face smiling back at me in a photo captioned, "The visionary behind the app," I felt a surge of anger I couldn't suppress. I called him immediately, my hands shaking as I dialed. He answered casually, his voice warm and familiar, which only fueled my fury. "Hey, what's up?" he said, as if nothing had happened. "How could you do this to me?" I blurted out, skipping the pleasantries. "I just saw the article about your app, my app. You stole my idea." There was a long pause on the other end before he finally responded. "Look, I know you're upset," he said, his tone annoyingly calm. "But it's not like you were doing anything with it. You had a good idea, but you weren't moving fast enough. I saw an opportunity, and I took it." "You took it?" I repeated, my voice trembling. "That idea was mine. I spent months working on it, and you had no right to take it from me." "It's business," he said with a shrug I could practically hear through the phone. "You're overreacting. If anything, you should be thanking me. You came up with a great concept, and I turned it into something real." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "Thanking you," I said, my voice rising. "You didn't turn it into something real. You turned it into your success, at my expense. Do you even understand what you've done?" He sighed, clearly annoyed. Look, I get that you're upset, but this is how the real world works. If you don't move fast, someone else will. It's not personal. It's just business, but it was personal. It wasn't just about the app or the money. It was about the trust one had placed in him, the vulnerability of sharing something I was passionate about, only to have it ripped away. His casual dismissal of my feelings only made it worse. By the end of the call, I was seething. He didn't apologize, didn't even acknowledge that what he had done was wrong. To him, it was just another business move. Nothing more, nothing less. As I hung up, I realized I was at a crossroads. I could let this go, let him get away with it, or I could fight back. But fighting back meant risking everything. My reputation, my relationship with my family, and the uphill battle of going against someone who had already gained so much momentum. I didn't know what the future held, but one thing was certain. I couldn't let him walk away without facing the consequences of his betrayal. The fallout from my brother's betrayal came swiftly and ruthlessly. As news of his app's success spread, so did the accolades. Friends, family, and even distant acquaintances reached out to congratulate him, calling him a genius and a visionary. Meanwhile, I felt like I was drowning in a sea of anger and frustration, powerless to stop the narrative he was building. When I tried to explain the truth to people, their responses ranged from dismissive to outright skeptical. "Are you sure it was your idea?" One friend asked hesitantly, as if I might be misremembering. Another said, "Maybe you just inspired him. You should feel proud. You're part of his success in a way." Their words felt like a punch to the gut. I wasn't part of his success. I was its foundation, and he had built it by stepping on me. Even my parents, the people I thought would believe me no matter what, refused to see my side. One evening, during a tense family dinner, my mom turned to me and said, "You should be happy for your brother. He's worked so hard for this." Her words stung more than I could have imagined. I worked hard too. I shot back, my voice trembling with emotion. That idea was mine. I spent months developing it, and he stole it from me. My dad sighed, clearly uncomfortable. "Maybe you should have done something with it sooner," he said, as though that justified my brother's actions. "You can't just sit on a good idea and expect it to stay yours forever." It wasn't just an idea. It was my plan, my concept, my work. I said, my voice rising. But no matter how much I tried to defend myself, their expressions stayed the same. Doubtful, dismissive, unwilling to take sides against my brother. Meanwhile, he was basking in the spotlight. Every day, I saw new posts on his social media, each one celebrating his entrepreneurial spirit and innovative thinking. Friends commented with admiration, journalists wrote glowing articles, and investors lined up to throw money at him. The worst part was that he didn't just ignore me, he actively undermined me. I started hearing whispers that he was telling people I was just bitter about his success. "She's jealous," he had said to one mutual friend. "She always wants to take credit for things she didn't follow through on." Hearing that made my blood boil. He was painting me as lazy, unmotivated, and petty, all to protect his own image. And the worst part? People believed him. Even my closest friends started to question me. "Do you really think he stole it?" one asked cautiously. "Or are you just upset he got there first?" Their doubt made me feel more isolated than ever. As the weeks went on, the weight of it all became unbearable. I knew I had to fight back, but I wasn't sure how. My brother had the money, the platform, and the public's admiration. I didn't have an answer yet, but one thing was certain. I wasn't going to let him win without a fight. The weight of my brother's betrayal pressed down on me every day, but the more I thought about it, the more determined I became. I couldn't let him get away with stealing what was mine. Not just the app idea, but the future I had envisioned for myself. It wasn't just about justice anymore. It was about reclaiming my voice in a narrative he had hijacked. I started by gathering every piece of evidence I could find. I dug through my notebooks, finding the early sketches and notes I had made when the idea first came to me. I pulled up emails and text messages, including the ones where I had shared the concept with him in detail. Each new piece of proof felt like a small victory, a reminder that I wasn't crazy or overreacting. This was my work, and I had the receipts to prove it. Legal action crossed my mind more than once, but the reality was daunting. My brother's new wealth gave him access to resources I couldn't match. Lawyers, PR teams, damage control. He had it all. And me? I had my laptop, a mountain of debt from trying to fund the original app idea, and the truth. It didn't feel like enough. Instead of heading to court, I decided to take my story public. Late one night, after hours of hesitation and rewrites, I hit post on a lengthy explanation of what had happened. In it, I laid out the timeline of events, From the moment I came up with the idea to the day I discovered my brother had stolen it. I attached screenshots of our text conversations, photos of my original sketches, and even a voice memo where I had excitedly pitched the concept to him over the phone. The post went viral almost overnight. Comments flooded in, many from people who were outraged on my behalf. "This is disgusting," one person wrote. "Your brother should be ashamed of himself." Others offered support, sharing similar stories of betrayal and urging me to keep fighting. For the first time since this ordeal began, I felt like I wasn't alone. The tide was finally turning, and people were starting to see my brother for what he really was, a thief. But, of course, he wasn't about to take it lying down. Within hours of my post gaining traction, he fired back with his own. In a carefully crafted response, complete with professional-looking graphics and a polished tone, he accused me of being a jealous sibling who couldn't handle his success. "She's always had a chip on her shoulder," he wrote. "I've supported her in everything she's done, but now that I've achieved something, she wants to tear me down. It's sad, really." His post was calculated to play to his audience, the investors, the fans, the people who had bought into his narrative of being a self-made entrepreneur. And it worked, at least partially. Some of the comments on his post echoed the ones I had feared most. "This just sounds like sour grapes," one person wrote. "If she really had such a great idea, why didn't she do something with it?" But not everyone was buying his story. My evidence was hard to dismiss, and several people pointed out the inconsistencies in his version of events. "If you supported her so much, why didn't you mention her in your launch?" one commenter asked. "This doesn't add up." The online battle was draining, both emotionally and mentally. Each time I logged on, I braced myself for a mix of support and hostility. Some days, it felt like I was gaining ground. Other days, it felt like an unwinnable war. Still, I refused to give up. This wasn't just about proving I was right. It was about standing up for myself in a way I never had before. My brother had underestimated me, thinking I would stay silent and let him take credit for my work. But he was wrong. The fight was far from over, but for the first time, I felt like I had a chance. As my story gained traction online, the responses became a whirlwind of support, skepticism, and outright hostility. For every comment demanding justice, there was another accusing me of being bitter or jealous. "This sounds like a case of sibling rivalry," one person wrote dismissively. "Why didn't she act on her idea if it was so great?" Others, however, rallied behind me. "She has receipts," one commenter pointed out, sharing screenshots of the evidence I had posted. He clearly took her work and passed it off as his own. Give her credit. While I appreciated the support, it was exhausting trying to navigate the storm of opinions. Every notification felt like a gamble. Was it someone siding with me or someone tearing me down? My inbox filled with messages from strangers, some offering encouragement, while others accused me of being a clout chaser. It was a constant emotional roller coaster, and I started to question whether going public had been the right choice. Meanwhile, my brother leaned hard into his self-made success narrative, using every platform he could to paint himself as the hardworking sibling who had earned his place in the spotlight. In interviews, he spoke with a practiced humility that made me sick to my stomach. "I've always been passionate about innovation," he said in one interview. "It's all about seeing opportunities and acting on them. Some people just don't have that same fire." The thinly veiled jab at me didn't go unnoticed. Watching him spin the narrative so effortlessly, twisting the truth into something that suited him, was infuriating. He portrayed himself as a visionary, conveniently leaving out the part where his vision had come from my sketches and plans. What hurt the most wasn't just his lies. It was seeing how many people believed him. The comments on his posts and interviews were filled with praise and admiration. "You're such an inspiration," one person wrote. "It's amazing what you've accomplished." Every time I saw those words, it felt like a dagger to the chest. How could people not see through him? How could they ignore the evidence I had shared? The doubt began to creep in, making me question whether I had done enough to prove my case. But the tides weren't entirely in his favor. A growing number of people started to dig deeper, questioning his story and pointing out inconsistencies. "Why didn't you mention your sister during the app's launch?" one user asked on social media. "If she inspired you, shouldn't she get some credit?" His responses to these questions were vague at best. He brushed them off with comments like, "It was a family conversation, nothing official," or, "I've always been the one with the drive to make things happen." The public backlash was building, but it was a double-edged sword. While it brought attention to my side of the story, it also dragged me deeper into a battle I wasn't sure I had the strength to fight. Still, I refused to back down. My brother might have millions and a carefully curated public image, but I had the truth on my side. And as long as people were willing to listen, I would keep speaking up. The fight was far from over, and the fallout was only just beginning. Just when I was beginning to feel like I was fighting a losing battle, an unexpected message appeared in my inbox. It was from a former colleague of my brother's, someone who had worked with him during the app's early development. The subject line read, "I think you deserve to know." Their email was lengthy but validating. "I saw your post," they wrote. "I worked with your brother when he was first pitching the app to investors. From the start, it was clear the concept wasn't his. He mentioned several times that it was something you had come up with. He even joked that you'd kill him if you found out he was taking credit." Reading those words felt like a weight lifting off my chest. For the first time, someone outside of my circle was corroborating my story. They offered to provide a statement or speak to the media if needed. Their willingness to stand up for the truth gave me the confidence I had been searching for. I immediately shared their statement online, adding it to the growing list of evidence I had already posted. This time, the reaction was different. People began to take notice, and the narrative started to shift. "You've been vindicated," one commenter wrote. "It's clear who the real visionary is." Another said, "If your brother admitted it to his colleagues, how can he keep lying like this? Disgusting." The support was overwhelming, but what really made an impact was the reaction from a few brave reporters who decided to dig deeper into my brother's claims. Their investigations uncovered inconsistencies in his timeline and a pattern of embellishments in his interviews. It wasn't long before one of these reporters contacted me directly. "We're working on a piece about the origins of the app," they said. "Would you be willing to share your side of the story in detail?" The article that followed was a bombshell. It laid out the timeline of events, including my brother's early development meetings where he had reportedly referenced me as the source of the idea. It also highlighted the evidence I had posted online, weaving together a compelling narrative that was hard to refute. The fallout was immediate. Social media exploded with reactions, and the comments on my brother's posts took a sharp turn. "So you're just a fraud?" one person wrote. "All that success built on someone else's work? Pathetic." For the first time, my brother was on the defensive. His carefully curated image of a self-made entrepreneur began to crack under the pressure. He posted a half-hearted statement, claiming he had always been inspired by our family's creativity and that the app was a collaborative effort. But it was too little, too late. The damage had been done, and people weren't buying his excuses anymore. For the first time in months, I felt like I could breathe. The truth was finally coming out, and my brother's empire was starting to show signs of collapse. But I knew this wasn't just about public perception. It was about reclaiming what was mine and setting the record straight for good. The tide was turning, but there was still more work to be done. The fallout from the growing public scrutiny was nothing compared to the storm brewing within my own family. As the truth about my brother's actions started to surface, the reactions at home were anything but supportive. My parents, who had been hesitant to take sides from the beginning, were now openly angry with me. "You're ruining his reputation," my dad said one evening, his voice tight with frustration. "This isn't how families handle things. Can't you just work this out privately?" I stared at him, incredulous. "Work it out privately?" I repeated, my voice shaking. "I tried. I went to him directly, and he dismissed me. He didn't care about making things right. All he cares about is protecting his image and keeping what he stole." My mom, usually the peacemaker, jumped in. "You don't understand what this is doing to him," she said, her tone almost pleading. "He's under so much stress right now. Do you really want to tear your brother down like this?" "Tear him down?" I snapped. "He built his success on my work. I'm not tearing him down. I'm just asking him to take responsibility for what he did. Why is that so hard to understand?" But no matter how much I tried to explain, my parents couldn't, or wouldn't, see my side. To them, I was the troublemaker, the sibling who was disrupting the family dynamic. My dad even suggested I drop the issue entirely. "This has gone too far," he said. "You've made your point. Let it go." Let it go? The words echoed in my head, and I felt a surge of frustration unlike anything I'd experienced before. How could they expect me to let go of something so important? How could they side with him after everything he had done? Meanwhile, my brother was doing everything he could to widen the rift. He doubled down on his narrative, accusing me of being jealous and vindictive. "She's always been like this," he told our parents during one particularly tense family dinner. "She can't stand to see me succeed." His words were like a knife to the heart. Growing up, we had always been competitive, but it had never felt malicious. Now, it was clear he was willing to destroy our relationship to save his own skin. The divide between us grew deeper with every passing day. My parents, caught in the middle, refused to take a definitive stance. My dad would shake his head in disappointment whenever the subject came up, while my mom would cry, begging us to make peace. But how could there be peace when my brother refused to acknowledge what he had done? How could I move on when the people who were supposed to support me seemed more concerned about his reputation than the truth? The tension reached its peak during a family gathering meant to clear the air. My brother arrived late, wearing the smug expression that had become all too familiar. "Let's just get this over with," he said as he sat down. The conversation quickly devolved into a shouting match. My dad accused me of being stubborn. My mom begged us to stop fighting, and my brother sat there, feigning exasperation. "You're making this a bigger deal than it needs to be," he said at one point, his tone condescending. "A bigger deal?" I shot back, my voice trembling with anger. "You stole my work, lied about it, and turned everyone against me. How is that not a big deal?" The room fell silent, the weight of my words hanging in the air. For a brief moment, I thought I saw a flicker of guilt in my brother's eyes. But if it was there, it disappeared as quickly as it came. That night, as I left the gathering, I realized something important. I couldn't keep trying to win my family's approval. They were too invested in maintaining the status quo, too afraid to confront the reality of what had happened. If I wanted to move forward, I had to accept that some relationships might never heal, and that sometimes standing up for yourself means standing alone. The breaking point came when one of the investigative reporters, who had been digging into my brother's rise to success, uncovered a series of emails that blew the entire situation wide open. The emails, exchanged between my brother and a developer he had hired, were explicit. In one, my brother described the app in detail and claimed it was his vision, but what stood out most was his mention of our initial conversations. "This is something my sibling came up with, but I've refined it," one email read. Another was even more damning. "If anyone asks, this was entirely my concept. No need to mention family." When the story broke, it spread like wildfire. The emails were published in full, leaving no room for doubt. My brother had stolen my idea, lied about it, and built his empire on a foundation of deceit. The backlash was immediate and brutal. Investors, who had once praised him as a visionary, began pulling their funding. Public opinion shifted almost overnight, with former supporters calling him out for his dishonesty. "We believed in you," one investor wrote in a public statement. "But integrity is non-negotiable. We're cutting ties effective immediately." The app's reputation, once sparkling and untouchable, quickly became tarnished. Users boycotted the platform, social media turned against him, and journalists picked apart every aspect of his story. His carefully curated image of a self-made entrepreneur crumbled under the weight of the truth. For the first time, my brother was on the defensive. He went silent on social media, canceled interviews, and avoided public appearances. The confident, untouchable persona he had maintained for so long was gone, replaced by a man scrambling to salvage what little he had left. Then, out of the blue, he called me. I hesitated before answering, unsure of what to expect. "Hey," he said, his voice quieter than I'd ever heard it. "We need to talk." When we met, he looked like a shadow of his former self, tired, stressed, and desperate. "I messed up," he admitted, his eyes avoiding mine. "I should have given you credit from the start." I waited, arms crossed, for him to continue. "We can fix this," he said, leaning forward. "We'll tell everyone we worked on the idea together. Spin it as a collaboration. People love a redemption story, and this way, we both win." His words were calculated, not remorseful. He wasn't apologizing because he cared. He was apologizing because he had no other choice. I shook my head, the anger and hurt bubbling to the surface. "You want me to help you rebuild your image after everything you've done?" I asked, my voice steady but firm. "You lied to me, stole from me, and tried to ruin my reputation. You don't get to spin this into a story about teamwork." He looked at me, his expression pleading. "Please," he said, "I'll give you a share of the company. We can split the profits. Just help me fix this." But I wasn't interested in his offers. "You made your bed," I told him, standing up. "Now you have to lie in it." For the first time, I saw genuine fear in his eyes. He had always believed he could talk his way out of anything, charm anyone into forgiving him. But this time, there was no escape. As I walked away, I felt a strange sense of closure. The empire he had built was falling apart, and for once, I didn't feel powerless. The truth was out, and he was finally facing the consequences of his actions. But the journey wasn't over. The damage he had done to my life, my career, and my family was something I would carry with me for a long time. Still, I knew one thing for sure. I wouldn't let his betrayal define me. With my brother's empire in ruins and the truth finally exposed, I felt a mix of relief and sadness. The validation I had craved was there, but so was the undeniable fact that our relationship, once built on trust and shared dreams, was now shattered beyond repair. The betrayal had left scars that no amount of apologies could erase. The fallout within our family was equally devastating. Some relatives, particularly those who had bought into my brother's image, blamed me for ruining him. "He's already lost so much," one aunt said during a family gathering. "Did you really have to go public?" Others, like my cousin who had seen the evidence firsthand, stood firmly in my corner. "He brought this on himself," she argued. "If anything, you were too patient with him." My parents remained conflicted, caught between loyalty to their son and the undeniable proof of his betrayal. My mom tried to mediate, calling it a misunderstanding despite everything that had come to light. My dad, on the other hand, avoided the subject altogether, retreating into a quiet disappointment that weighed on the entire family dynamic. For my part, I decided to focus on rebuilding my own life. With the truth out, I felt free to revisit my original ideas and start fresh. It wasn't easy. Watching someone else succeed with something you created is a pain that lingers. But I refused to let his actions define my future. I poured my energy into new projects, ones that built on the lessons I had learned from this ordeal. I reached out to mentors, expanded my network, and surrounded myself with people who truly believed in me. Slowly but surely, I began to regain the confidence I had lost. The support I received from strangers online was also a surprising source of strength. Messages poured in from people who had read about my story, many of them sharing their own experiences of betrayal and resilience. Their encouragement reminded me that I wasn't alone, and it fueled my determination to keep moving forward. Meanwhile, my brother all but vanished. Once the darling of the tech world, he now faced the harsh reality of his actions. Investors abandoned him, his reputation was in tatters, and even his closest allies distanced themselves from the mess he had created. He moved away shortly after the final article about his downfall was published, retreating from the spotlight he had once craved. For someone who had built his life on appearances, the humiliation of being exposed was too much to bear. Though I didn't relish his suffering, I couldn't deny the sense of justice it brought. For too long, he had coasted on lies and manipulation, and now he was finally being held accountable. As I worked to reclaim my narrative, I realized something important. This wasn't just about him. It was about me taking control of my story, learning to stand up for myself, and refusing to let anyone else determine my worth. The road ahead wasn't going to be easy, but it was mine to walk. And for the first time in a long time, I felt ready to take the next step. As I reflect on everything that happened, I realize this experience, painful as it was, taught me more than I ever wanted to know about betrayal, resilience, and the importance of standing up for yourself. My brother's success had been built on lies, and while it was painful to see him fall, it was a necessary reckoning for the truth to finally come out. Our relationship, once built on shared dreams and sibling camaraderie, is beyond repair. I've made peace with that. Sometimes, things break in ways that can't be fixed, no matter how much we might wish otherwise. And that's okay. Letting go of that relationship has allowed me to prioritize my own growth and well-being over trying to mend something that was never mine to fix. One of the most important lessons I've learned is that my worth isn't tied to how others treat me or what they take from me. It's in how I choose to respond, how I choose to rebuild, and how I choose to move forward. Today, I'm pouring my energy into new projects, ones that align with the vision I've always had for myself. The lessons I learned from this ordeal, about trust, boundaries, and perseverance, are guiding me as I chart a path that's entirely my own. The people around me now are those who genuinely believe in me. Friends, mentors, and colleagues who see my potential and want to help me succeed, not take advantage of me. Their support reminds me daily that I don't need to rely on anyone else's validation to achieve my goals. I may not be a millionaire, but I've gained something far more valuable: confidence in my own abilities, the strength to advocate for myself, and the clarity to see what truly matters. Success isn't just about money or accolades. It's about staying true to yourself and standing firm in your values. As for my brother, I don't spend much time thinking about him anymore. He's still out there somewhere, trying to pick up the pieces of his shattered reputation, but that's his journey, not mine. I've let go of the anger and hurt he caused me because holding on to it only weighed me down. The truth is, I'm not defined by his betrayal or by the empire he built on my back. I'm defined by how I chose to rise above it, to reclaim my voice, and to carve out a future that's mine alone. And that's a story I'm proud to tell.